OpenPoint's purchase order module provides an efficient method of creating purchase orders for all your inventoried materials. The process starts with the generation of a purchase order document containing the materials you are purchasing, which you can then send to your vendors. The software then allows you to update the status of incoming orders at the point where the materials are received at the warehouse on through the entry of an invoice indicating the final dollars, including shipping and tax, that the vendor is charging. Along the way, OpenPoint updates inventory counts and dollars and keeps the unit prices adjusted on an average cost basis. The purchase order module also coordinates with the work order and inventory systems to keep inventory status information up to date so you can easily see what's on order and what materials need to be issued from inventory for upcoming or ongoing jobs. So the first screen we're going to take a look at here is the purchase order dashboard. What we're looking at in the first section here, these cards are representing the most recent purchase order records that you've taken a look at. And then right below that, it's going to show the workflow progress of any in-progress purchase orders. And so in this case, we're seeing that there's 3 requested POs, 3 that are approved, and 5 that are received. If you click on any of these cards, I'll click on the approved one here, then you'll get a list of all the approved work orders, and then you can just drill down from there to get to the actual details of the purchase order. You can also perform searches, and if you just type in the text box, it's going to search by the purchase order number or also by the vendor. And so if I type in 09, for example, I'm going to get this PO that's 100-09. It's going to search anywhere in the text for that. Same for if you type in Grayson, you're going to get all the Grayson Electric purchase orders. If you hit the drop down there's some additional fields too. You can also search on the status. You can do multiple statuses if you want, and also by the date ranges for particular statuses such as requested, approved, received, or closed. So if you wanted to do a search on the received ones, like say for the month of August, you would select received and then do 8/1 and then through 8/31 to give you a full range for that particular month. You can also use the controls there for the calendar to be able to do it that way. So that's just a way of being able to do some of the navigation for getting around and finding purchase orders that are previously existing. I really like to use the recent purchase orders section. I tend to be working on the same things over and over again, so if I go and click on one of those, it's just going to show me that particular purchase order record, and this is the overview page for that. So we can just take a look at this and kind of give you an overview, and then we'll actually go and walk through the entry of a PO from scratch and have it go through its process, and we'll do that as the second stage here. So we're looking at the PO number again with the vendor. Below that we have the status, and so this is going to show as received and the date. To go to the next stage in the process, it's always going to be the button here. Sometimes you'll have 2 options depending on what the situation is, and so we can close it if we wanted to. We're not done actually doing all of the invoicing side, so it doesn't make sense to do that just yet. You can also hit the menu here and you can roll back. So if you need to go back a step, you can roll back, and if you want, you can roll all the way back to the very beginning. And there's another way of closing here, or there's a help file option here as well. You also have the purchase order setup, and so I'll go back over these fields in just a minute when we actually enter one from scratch. But it's basically, this is going to show you kind of the key fields on the PO, and if you click on more info, then that's how you can go in and edit those after the fact. So again, we'll go through that in just a little bit, and you'll see a little bit more of details about those particular data elements that are showing up on that screen. To the right of that is the purchase order items section. So all the materials that you purchase are going to show up here, and it's just going to be a line item list, and it shows those sequentially by this line number field, and it's going to show you the material code, the descriptions, the estimated dollars, what was actually invoiced so far, and you can see there hasn't been anything invoiced on this particular line item, and then the dollars that were invoiced as well. The little drop down button here lets you export the grid to Excel. There's not too many items on this one, but if you had one that was more complicated, then you might want to get a little bit more detail. This will also show a few more columns too than what just the grid on the overview page actually shows. So right below that we have the transactions grid. So once we start receiving into inventory or doing the invoicing portion of it where we're putting in the real dollars, that's going to have an impact on the inventory system. So anything that impacts inventory, there needs to be a transaction for that. So those transactions will get created through the process, and you'll see that as we actually go through and enter one from scratch. And same thing here, we can export that to Excel and get those transactions in that format. Over here on the right, you can see the status of the PO as it's going through the process. So the blue circles indicate that that particular step has been reached, and it'll show you the date and the person who then performed that step. So if it's still gray, that means we haven't got there yet. And then right below that's the estimated cost, and then as we start invoicing, you'll see the invoice amount start to increase as well. So over here on the right, we have some of the options that also tie to the particular purchase order record. And the purchase order setup is the same thing as the More Info button here. Reports we'll come back to in a little bit. And then the purchase order items, this actually lists out the items and allows you to get to the details of what is on each of those items. We're going to enter one of those from scratch, so we'll kind of do that in a little more detail in just a bit. And then below that this is where you actually enter the transactions that end up impacting this transactions grid. So the receive will receive the quantities into inventory. The invoice puts in the final dollar amounts, including the shipping and tax. And adjustments are for making an adjustment to an invoiced item. Probably the most common thing is like a credit memo where you want to reduce the dollars by a certain amount, or if there was just a mistake and you just needed to add a little bit more, for example, to an existing invoiced line item, you can do that there as well. And then transactions is just going to show us a full screen view of the transaction data. Okay, so let's go back and enter one from scratch. So I'm back on the job dashboard, the purchase order dashboard, and I'm going to click on this plus button, which always means add a record. And let's go ahead and put a new record in here. And you can put it whatever you want for the PO number. That can also be a sequentially auto-generated number as well. And then we have the next one here is the type. And notice it's grayed out. Right now we just have a single type called standard, and we're something that can be expanded upon. But for now we're just going to go with the standard one, and we can add more of those later and describe those in future videos. And so the next thing we want to do is the warehouse. So this is where the materials are going to go. And then after that is the vendor code. So if I know the code, I can just enter that in here. So as an example, for Grayson Electric, it's 1234. Or you can hit the button and you can do a search. And you can do that by code or by the vendor name. So I could have also said, Grayson, just type in Gray for that, and then click it, and then it'll do the same thing there. The vendor order number is optional, and it's the number that the vendor themselves will use to identify that particular purchase order document. So when you're done, you click the Create button, and now you've got a blank PO that you can start working with. So usually the next step in this process is to start entering in the purchase order items. And so to do that, you click on the Purchase Order Items button over here. And of course we have a blank list because we haven't added any yet, so we're going to hit the plus button. And then we can start entering in some of these values here. So I can type in my material code, and that will work great. If I wanted to use the drop down, or the picker button there, I could do that as well. And type in by code or by part of the name. So I'll just do part of the description there, and I can easily go through and say, oh, here's my poll, and select that just as well. And the description can be overridden. It'll take the materials description out of the material section by default. You can change the order counts here. So let's say we wanted to order 3 of those, and then you can put in the unit price, and it'll of course calculate what the base cost is. The total down here is going to calculate as you do things like add shipping. So if I wanted to put in $500 for shipping, then it'll add to that. If you have to pay taxes, you can enter those values in it as well. And there's a few other optional values down here, like the vendor item number, manufacturer, ship by if you want to do that, and also estimated arrival. I'm going to leave those blank for now since they're not actually required. So I'm going to put that in there, and I can keep adding more, so give me a blank record to keep on going. Or if I'm done, I can just click the Save button, and it'll save those and add them to the purchase order items list there. So that's really kind of the initial stage of just entering the POs items, and I'm just going to kind of go with that for right now, just keep this very simple. So the next thing is the approval step. And so notice here that we have the approval button showed up just like we saw in the other step where we saw that there was a close option to move the received one to close. There's also this other item called close as ordered. So if you want to do everything as a single step, so let's say that you already had the invoice for that particular purchase order, so you knew what all the items were, all the shipping costs, taxes, etc. If you enter those in, just exactly how they're going to be invoiced on the purchase order item, so back on this screen here, then what you can do is you can actually click on close as ordered. What it'll do then is it'll actually receive those in. It will also do the invoicing step automatically, so it'll create those transactions, it'll update the inventory, and then it'll close out the whole PO. So you can actually be done right at that step if you want. Other utilities are going to want to go through a more of a formal process that's more of a closer to real time. And that's what I'm going to do for the rest of this particular demo here, is I'm actually going to go through and approve this. And so now the PO has indicated that's approved here. You can see this light up on this side as well. And so now, a certain amount of time has passed. You've probably actually, let's go ahead and show you what the PO form looks like. So I just went to reports and I'm going to say, run this purchase order form document. This is what you would send off to the vendor. And you may have a different process for this. It's just an optional step. Maybe you communicate by email, for example, or you put the order in through our website. But this actually does the purchase order information. It's got your utility name, the vendor information, and then the items that are being purchased. And of course, these templates are completely customizable, so you can have these have your logo on them and whatever information you want to communicate out to the vendor when you send those out. So I'm going to close that out, and let's go back a step. So now the vendor has the PO. A certain amount of time has passed, and now the materials are being received at the warehouse. So to do the receiving step, you would click on receive, and then you click on the item, and then in a lot of cases you're just going to put in the received quantity. So here we just have a quantity of 3, so I will receive that. This highlighted automatically the done receiving button, and so that saw that we had 3 on order and that we were receiving 3, so it's saying, hey, that's probably done, so you can indicate that there. You can optionally put in the condition of the items if you want to do that. And notice there's also this back ordered option. So let's say that we only had 2 of the items that were being received right now, and the rest were going to come at a later date, and the vendor might say, hey, this is on back order, it's going to be another month. You can actually set the received to 2, the back ordered count to 1, and then you'll have that recorded. So then it'll show up, and different reports and things can then show back ordered items, and it's there for you informationally to be able to see. So let's see, that is really all that there is to it. Like I said, the easy thing is just to put in the received quantity and maybe optionally a condition, and you just say done, and then we'll save that. So now we have our first transaction that's showing up. And notice too that in this case the PO went automatically from approved to received. So because we said, hey, we're done, and there wasn't any other POs to receive, or PO line items, then it says, hey, this is done. I'm just going to automatically take it to the next step, so you don't have to worry about that. So then the next step after that is when, so in this case, let me back up one step. When the receiving happens, the inventory is updated. It's going to take the estimated dollars and use those to update the unit price and the total dollar value in inventory. In the next step, we're actually going to say, well, we've got an invoice back from the vendor. It's got the actual dollars, it has the actual final shipping and tax information, and so what you want to do there is click on the invoice button and click on the item again, and then indicate the invoice count, and then you can put in the final base dollars. So let's say it was 2,500, and the base shipping, let's say it was 500, and the actual final tax dollars if you have tax to be concerned about. So this is the final numbers, and I'm going to say done to that and save. And so again, we have another transaction that gets created, this invoice transaction. And what happens there is it actually goes and reverses out the old dollars that were the estimated dollars from the receiving step, and then it puts in the new final dollars from the invoicing. So that may cause an adjustment to be made to the unit price and the total dollar amount, depending on if the estimated dollars and the final dollars are off. And so the reason we do that is to always try to keep the inventory updated with the best information that we have, because you want to be able to issue from your inventory before you necessarily have all the invoiced dollars. And so usually those numbers are pretty close, and so you might have a slight unit price adjustment, but that way it doesn't keep you from having to wait. You can do all your issuing out of inventory, and you'll have some pretty good data to work with at that point. So one thing to notice too is that the PO automatically went to closed. And so it's just like with the receiving step, when all the invoice items have been invoiced, it's going to say, hey, I'm done with this. I'm just going to automatically close that. And so, so that's pretty much the basic process. We looked at kind of the overall screens, how those interact with each other. Then we went and actually added a PO, put in all the PO line items, and then went through the entire workflow process. We didn't do adjustments. That's just kind of a very infrequent thing that needs to be done. But we might do that on a separate video so you can see how that might work. And then there are a number of reports too that you utilize some of the purchase order items, the POs themselves, and the transactions. We'll probably save those for a future video.